Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Joys of the Junk Era, the show about baseball cards of a certain age and the collectors who love them. I am one of those collectors, and today I'd like to continue to talk about the grand year of 1989 in the world of baseball cards. I thought since last episode we looked at the stunningly beautiful and iconic Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookie card, now back in his protective case. We'd look at what else was going on in the world of junk wax. Upper Deck was anything but junk wax. But the other card companies weren't on board yet, sort of with the new era of collecting. So I had three of the major card companies packs, 89 packs lying around. I don't have 89 Donruss or 89 Fleer. You know what those look like. I will try and pick some of those up soon. But I actually happen to have these three, so I thought we'd pop them open, see what we see what we like, see what we don't like, and then make all sorts of judgments about how they are not as good as the Upper Deck. Or perhaps you disagree. I'd love to hear that. So let's take a look. This is our 89 score, player, and trivia cards photo quality. All right, so they've put a sticker on here, or a label on here that says photo quality. I don't know if that's in reference or in connection with what Upper Deck was doing. They do indeed have a fairly high quality photo look to the image. They are not nearly... it's not nearly as high quality as the Upper Deck card for sure. But let's flip through, and in my opinion, this design of this card with sort of the plain solid green bar at the bottom, thinner green bars around the side, and the basic player information down at the bottom is really sort of stuck in the 80s, whereas this Upper Deck has this emulation of a first baseline on the side of its card, and of course the sort of more interesting, more detailed star emblem at the bottom, and of course the hologram on the back, and the sort of marbled background on which Griffey's little profile is written. But let's flip through this pack and see what we see. All right, Chili Davis, Mike Greenwell, Albert Hall. I don't know if you've noticed, but all three of these so far are players hitting. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. And we've got one of these mini holograms on the back. I remember these holograms as being more or less an annoying insert that would just sort of stick at the bottom of your shoebox, and you'd find it and not really know what to do with it. 1954, a year to remember. Okay, we're back to... Oh, okay, we've got a pitcher, so he is pitching. We've got a hitter hitting. We've got a pitcher pitching. We've got a hitter hitting. A pitcher pitching, a hitter hitting, a hitter hitting. Mike Harkey, rookie. Put that one aside. I actually like this card, but he is a pitcher pitching. Craig Worthington of the Orioles. Don't frankly remember him, but hey. And a Gerald Clark. By the way, hitters hitting. So... my take on these scorecards is that they are not super creative. You have sort of two images, and it literally does not at all, there's some of my wife's makeup, sorry, does not at all diverge from that. But you get sort of the I guess we could call it like some sort of awkward simplicity. There's not a lot to these cards, but they don't exactly look like one coherent, logical uh, um, format of baseball card. There's just this sort of vague baseball shape at the bottom here. It's almost like they came up with a design for a baseball card, put a bunch of had their photographer sit out at the behind home plate and just take a picture of every ball player, and they were done. Whereas, you know, the effort, I think, that went into this sort of card, and the quality of the imagery, the beauty of the photography, I think, is much sort of more ahead of its time, I guess. So let's see where we end up with our 89 Bowman and 89 Topps. I should note that I believe there is a Griffey in these series as well. I can feel there's a stick of gum in these Bowman cards. There it is. Not gonna eat it. The Bowmans were super annoying because they were slightly larger than the other cards. And I think, in my opinion, you have a nicer looking card than the scorecards, without a doubt. I mean, I think Bowman is generally considered to be a higher end card. They were around for, you know, since the beginning of baseball card collecting, and I think the like quality of this photo, while it's certainly not as glossy, is quite nice. There's some nice light around. I don't even know who this is. Dan Gladden, I think the signature says. Danny Gladden. Okay, so you don't have the same sort of high end finish. This just feels like a sort of lower end cardboard here, but you do have a really nice photo on this Bowman card, and I remember them as being slightly sort of above baseline in terms of market quality. So that's really nice. So let's see what else we got. These are portraits, like the Griffey. Let's see. There's a Ripken. I like that card. I mean, like, but if you compare the Ripken to this Dan Gladden, putting aside the fact that one of them's Cal Ripken and one of them's Dan Gladden, I would take, from a purely sort of photographic perspective, this picture. It's just a lot nicer in terms of sort of the artistry of the photography. I'm not a photographer or anything like that, but you have the light sort of glowing around his head. You have good light and shadow. You have this sort of abstract background, and it makes for a nice picture. I would have reduced the size of the Bowman logo there. It's like half the size of his head. And the Ripken card is nice because it's Cal Ripken. I mean, that certainly adds something to the card, but it doesn't really necessarily make this an objectively beautiful card or anything like that. All right, so let's see. We've got some other fellow from the Twins here, Shane Rowley, Andy Bennis, who for some reason was like my favorite player growing up. The problem with these cards, I'd say, is like they're basically just headshots. They are just busts of the player completely out of context, which isn't always the problem, but like, you can do a bust and still sort of indicate that he's a baseball player, like in this Griffey. So you kind of lose that. They just become like sort of portraits, which if you're a baseball fan, doesn't sort of get you all the way over the line necessarily. Okay, Whitey Ford. I don't think this is anything. Yeah, so it's some kind of promotional material. It's still a cool card. These cards have to some extent. Here's Rick Honeycutt. The sort of feel of like a old baseball card, like like a tobacco card almost. Okay, Andrew Thomas. Oh, Andres Thomas. I've never heard of this guy either. Ken Phelps. Alan Davis. I mean, the other problem with these is like you have to look on the back to figure out who they are. Um, and John Dobson and Jim Sundberg. Okay, so a lot of kind of common no names, but a really nice Ripken and a really beautiful card from a guy that I have never heard of, but I just think is a beautiful, quite sort of elegant photograph. Dan Gladden. All right, so in my opinion, Bowman did a lot better than Topps. I'm sorry, than Score. All right, so let's see. Let's check out our Topps cards. And Topps should be sort of the gold standard. They had by far the most market share at this time. They've been around for a long time. And they just were sort of, I guess, cleaning house in terms of, wow, look how dirty that is. All kinds of disgusting residue in there. There's like this chalky residue on the cards. This on this Scott Bankhead card is totally ruined. All right, and we start off, we limp in with a company store promotional card. So Topps kind of falls in the middle between the Bowman and the Score, I would say. You get like somewhat simple, but quite nice, I think. And this also, this sort of logo, or I'm sorry, this sort of design here, where it says the player name and player team is, I think, also quite iconic at this point. I certainly remember it well. I think it's sort of mirrored now in the 2018. Oh, there's a Mark McGwire. It's sort of mirrored in the 2018 design with this like sort of, I call it the water slide. It's more obvious on the 2018, but it's like that classic curve that you see on a lot of baseball jerseys. There's Brett Butler, Terry Pendleton, Billy Hatcher, Scott Bankhead. The card that we saw was just totally destroyed. Rick Rhoden, Jerry Roos, Gary Redus, Ken Caminiti. Draft pick, Monty Ferris. Don't know much from him. Jim Pankovitz. There's a Kirby Puckett All-Star. Okay. And a Tim Crews. So I think the Topps sort of, I mean, they're all scattered around here, but the Topps sort of fall somewhere in between the sort of lackluster, sort of rote Score images that are just sort of pictures of batters and pitchers without any regard to their, sort of undynamic pictures, versus the Bowman, which are pure portraits. There's more variety in the Topps, I think, of players sort of doing their thing. You have this one here of him just sort of like, I guess, Brett Butler just hanging out between batters or something like that, doing some kind of fielding. You have this off the field kneeling shot. You have the portraiture. You have the action shot. So there's more variety in the Topps. I'd say I'd order it Bowman, Topps, and then the stack of Fleer over here. But in my personal view, nothing really compares to the 89 Upper Deck, and I think probably most people would agree. So these are my thoughts on what's going on in 1989. I'm sorry I didn't have the Donruss or the Fleer. They were interesting cards. I don't think there's many people that think the 89 Donruss or Fleer do anything special. They're both kind of ugly. But let me know if you have thoughts about how these other brands fare with Upper Deck. Thanks for watching.